Jeffrey Toobin is a so-called journalist on CNN. He's supposed to be a legal analyst, but he's within the field of journalism. But he loves the war on journalism. Now, he's not on the side of the journalists. He's on the side attacking the journalists. How dare you commit acts of journalism? How dare you? Well, bow your head to the American government. If the American government or the UK government says that you're doing something wrong, you must be doing something wrong. Why, legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, thank you so much for clarifying that. So he's going to attack David Miranda, who was stopped at the Heathrow airport, partner of Glenn Greenwald. Now, remember, he was detained for 9 hours, and they took all of his computers, laptops, cell phone, memory sticks, etc., and they destroyed them. Well, first, of course, they copied them. They got that information. You know, that's, if somebody did it to you and it wasn't the government, it'd be considered theft. Now, the government could do it if they had, for example, arrested you and they had you on a crime. And this, remember, the UK government used a part of the Terrorism Act to justify this, Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act. Do they think David Miranda is a terrorist? No, not remotely. Who cares? They just wanted to steal his stuff. And legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin thinks it was a wonderful idea. Let's start this discussion.
Let's be clear about what Mr. Miranda's role was here. I don't want to be unkind, but he was a mule. He was given something, he didn't know what it was, from one person to pass to another at the other end of an airport. Our prisons are full of drug mules. Glenn's view is, as long as one of the two people on either end of that transaction was a journalist, he can take anything he wants. He could take the nuclear launch codes. He could take the names of our undercover agents.
Do we know if he had any agents' names? No, who cares? Just preemptively raid a journalist, if you consider him a journalist, or any regular citizen. Just raid all of his stuff with no evidence and just take it and smash it and do whatever you like with it. Who cares? The government is above the law, apparently, and legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin agrees. Now, there's one part that he's right about. Miranda apparently had no idea what was in that material. He had gone to Germany to talk to Laura Poitras, who's involved in this reporting. So let's let Miranda explain that.
David, I know you had said that they took a laptop, memory sticks, an external hard drive, your cell phone, and more. Do you know what were stored on those devices? Was there classified material?
I don't know that. I mean, I was just taking those materials back to Glenn. I mean, you know, Glenn been working with a lot of stories along the years. I didn't quite follow everything that he writes every day. I can follow him because I have to have a life.
That's funny at the end. So it seems like, hey, wait a minute, Toobin's making a good point. He doesn't know what's in there, but he's been given some stuff. But wait a minute, you compared him to a drug mule. See, we know what a drug mule is carrying is illegal. It's illegal drugs. That's why he's a drug mule, and we can stop him. Well, you don't know what Miranda is carrying. You can't, without reasonable suspicion, come in there and say, I think he's a terrorist, I'm going to take all his stuff, right? And the government has admitted, yeah, they're like, did we think Miranda was a terrorist? Of course not. But we thought he might have some stuff. All right, but under that standard, couldn't they do that to any of you? Couldn't they do that to Jeffrey Toobin and say, yeah, all right, now give me all your stuff, give me all your laptops. By the way, if they did it to Jeffrey Toobin, he would be like, oh my God, what have they done? But I'm part of the elite, I'm part of the power structure. You can't do that to me. You're supposed to crush people who are against the government. Oh, he would cry and cry. I'd be like, what? Hey, Toobin, how do I know you're not a drug mule? How do I know you're not the equivalent of that? Well, let's let Toobin keep on with this absurd defense of the government.
And I mean, he's on a plane with stuff that is highly classified, you know, anything he wants. It turns out it wasn't the names of our undercover agents. It was the extremely classified, presumably, NSA material.
Presumably? Mr. Legal Analyst, you don't know that at all. Did the UK government tell you what was in there? Did you have some sort of scoop that you'd like to tell us about? Yeah, presumably it was NSA material. I don't know. The government says it, so I don't really care about the law. All I care is the government's always right. Oops, did I say that out loud? Now, more from Toobin.
Mr. Miranda was lucky that they used the terrorism law because he wasn't even delayed. He wasn't even stopped overnight. I mean, you know, I'm sure it was inconvenient to be stopped for 9 hours at the airport, but you know, when it happens to you on JetBlue, they don't even offer you a lawyer. So, I mean, I just don't think he was sent to the gulag. He was delayed for a while, and they took what appears to be stolen classified information. I think Mr. Miranda actually did pretty well, considering what he was carrying.
You don't know what he was carrying. Presumably stolen classified information. There's no evidence to that effect. But the so-called legal analyst doesn't give a damn because the government's always right. If they said they had important stuff, absolutely. Man, just let me run the government for one day. Let me just, as Toobin's walking through an airport, come here, and take all this shit and then steal it all and then break it in front of him. And watch him cry and cry and cry. Oh, what? What's the big deal? Oh, it was a extra layover. What are you crying about, Jeff? So now Miranda explains how it actually went down and the threats that went along with his 9-hour detention. Listen.
They asked me all kinds of questions, and they asked me about my relationship with Glenn. They asked me about my relationship with Laura and what I was doing on my trip to Germany, and what I was carrying, everything.
Did they actually ask you anything about terrorism?
No, they didn't ask me anything about terrorism, not one question about it. I have to ask them, do I have to answer this? And they asked, just telling me, like, if you don't answer this, you're gonna go to jail. And you know, that's a big thing, because like when they say like that I was under this law, this is terrorism. You know what UK and United States do. They have all the powers in the world to do anything they want with this. So in that moment, I was like really afraid what would happen to me.
Sure.
And you understand that I was for 8 hours without talking to anybody outside of the world. I didn't know what's happening, and they keep threatening me about me going to the jail.
So think about that. You think this is a JetBlue layover? When you can't talk to anybody in the outside world for 8 hours and they keep telling you, oh, you're going away. You're going to go away for a long, long time. We're keeping you under a terrorism legislation here. You better be careful. You better tell us everything you want. Does that sound like a pleasant layover, Jeffrey Toobin? Or does it seem like the state looking to intimidate you, threaten you, and do so, by the way, under the thinnest veneer of the law? Because for the 8th time, they know that he was not a terrorist, and they're doing this anyway to him. How do we know? One of the ways we know is that they didn't even ask him a single question about terrorism. And you still say, oh, yeah, sure, use the terrorism law. Who cares what the law says? I'm a legal analyst for the state, for Pravda. Oops. If you worked for Pravda, Jeffrey Toobin, you couldn't do this good a job. You'd be a little embarrassed about it. Because you're not just protecting the government. Now you're turning as a so-called journalist and attacking other real journalists. This is how they get, like, their corporatist Democrats attack progressive Democrats. The state always finds people within your own camp to attack you. So now the other thing is they got all of the information from Miranda immediately. And as I've told you, only 1 out of 2,000 people detained under this law is kept for over 6 hours. He was kept for the maximum 9 hours. You think they had extra questions? No. The whole point was to intimidate him, threaten him with the force of the law. Oh, it's just like a JetBlue layover, right, Jeffrey Toobin? So when the state does this, you know, these extrajudicial tactics that go way beyond the scope of any law, let alone this law, Jeffrey Toobin's the legal analyst on CNN here to say, absolutely, sir, I'd like to bow my head to you, sir. Great. Well, okay, let's let Glenn Greenwald address this.
Glenn, was he carrying classified material with him?
Well, I'm not going to talk about what he was carrying because that's our work product as journalists. Remember, both Laura and I are working with The Guardian as journalists. What I would say is every single newsroom in the United States, every single major news organization in the world has classified information. Reporting on what governments do in the secret is what journalism is about. So if you want to support the idea that states can just go and confiscate from journalists classified information, you should be demanding that your government go physically into newsrooms and seize whatever classified information is there. All of the best reporting over the last 40 years involves journalists having classified information. The Pentagon Papers, the Bush torture sites, CIA black sites, the illegal warrantless eavesdropping program. That's what investigative journalism is. And if you want to start criminalizing that, it means that you're asking as a citizen to be kept ignorant and to allow people in power to conceal what they're doing behind a wall of secrecy and to have no accountability or transparency. Journalism is not a crime and it is not terrorism.
So, Jeffrey Toobin, how are you going to answer that very good point that, wait a minute, almost every major story has classified information. Now, Bob Woodward had classified information that he leaked all over the place. He put it in books. And, by the way, the leader of Al-Qaeda said that he read those books and got information from Bob Woodward. So should every journalist have the Gestapo come in, rifle through their stuff, break their computers as they did at The Guardian, the UK did to The Guardian? If you're in any way related to a journalist, as David Miranda was, you should be able to be threatened for 9 hours at end, your stuff stolen, destroyed, etc. Well, Toobin says, yeah, actually, they should be allowed to do that. Watch.
That is Glenn Greenwald's argument, that it basically it's linking journalism, conducting journalism to acts of terror.
The word journalism is not magical immunity sauce that you can put on anything. That you can put on anything and eliminate any sort of liability. You know what? If he had the nuclear launch codes in there, he could. That they can take that. If he had the names of undercover operatives, they can take that.
Magical immunity sauce. Remember, this guy works at CNN. He's supposed to be on the side of the journalist. Oh, it's not magical immunity sauce. No, if you're a journalist, it doesn't matter. You think you're breaking a story? No, the government can crush you. I don't give a damn what kind of journalism you think you're doing. The government can do any damn thing they like to you. I'm the legal analyst. Now, funny enough, the guy who challenges him best, I think, was Anderson Cooper. So credit to him. And remember, he's also a host at CNN. So credit to the organization for at least having the conversation with other sides here. Watch.
I mean, he's being detained under a British a terrorism act, which is only supposed to be used to detect and find people who are connected to terrorists. There's no indication that David Miranda, they knew who he was. They knew he's not connected to some terrorist group.
Great Britain has its own laws that are similar to ours, but that are somewhat different. Their terrorism law takes it one step farther. They say, it's not just the material this person is a terrorist, but can be used by terrorists. And frankly, if terrorists know how we surveil their cell phone calls, how we surveil their texts, that could be useful to terrorists.
Couldn't any information published by a journalist be used by terrorists in some way? And,
no.
and can't that excuse be used to then detain journalists?
Not at all. Not classified not classified information of this. I mean, it would have to be classified information of this kind.
He gave us the Toobin look there. On this issue, he's been on the air several times. He's been busted on the air several times with perfectly good questions, not knowing how to answer them, and then give you the look that he gave there to Anderson Cooper. Yeah, well, wait a minute. Under that logic, Anderson's right. Couldn't the government say, well, anything you release to the public could be used by terrorists, so every single thing that a journalist does goes straight into the hands of terrorists? Maybe things like this. I don't know. The government's always right. Thank you, legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin.